Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Lessons Learned Part 11, things that I learned in my 20s. In this series of episodes, I will share the lessons that I've learned along the journey of my life. And specifically, I'll cover different aspects of my life now that I'm older, wiser, and can look back and reflect, and think about how I could have handled things differently back when I was younger. The goal is to provide others a guide so they skip over my mistakes and use my past experiences to learn something new about themselves, so they can learn from my mistakes and make the most out of their own journey. My 20s were a defining decade in my life with a lot of change and growth from it. In my early 20s, I really struggled with social anxiety and being embarrassed very easily in public. I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself and I didn't really know what direction in the world I wanted to go in. However, by the end of the decade, I had clear direction, purpose in my life with many goals. And I had solid plans for where I wanted to see myself within the next 5 years. My 20s were a time that I took the most risks in my life, and I benefited from it. For the most part, the risks that I took, I was rewarded from it. And looking back on it now, there are a few pieces that I want to share about my 20s that really defined me, so that you'll be able to gain some insights from my experience. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my background, my lessons learned, and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And here we go. I look back on my 20s really fondly these days, even though it was a very difficult period in my life. The reality was that I was really sheltered growing up, and my 20s were the first time that I tasted freedom from my parents. And because I was so sheltered, it was really hard for me to break out of my shell and be an individual out in this world. I took on new challenges during this decade, such as moving out of my parents' house, going to a new city, and also starting a new friends network. But because I was able to move to new cities, I adapted quickly and I had to be very flexible about my living conditions. And if I hadn't done that, I would not be as content in my life as I am today. Because looking back on my past, it really sucks not knowing anybody in a new city. Building up those connections, networks, and friendships took a long time to do. I learned lessons that shaped who I am and who I will become in this world. The overarching key for me during my 20s was to take risks and lots of it. Because crucially, you have your health and your ability to bounce back from failures faster. And this is a part of your life in which you can make a lot of mistakes and still bounce back to wherever you want to go in the end. I used this time to try out a lot of new experiences that I hadn't before. Some of it I liked and some of it I definitely didn't like. I really enjoyed tutoring, being a photo booth operator, and buying a tiny house. Things that I really didn't like was starting a 3D printing business, ballroom dancing, or rock climbing. But all those experiences definitely enriched my life and gave me stories to share with other people. So none of it was wasteful or lost experience. And in the end, every new experience taught a little bit something about myself. So these experiences became the foundation of who I am going forward into my 30s. And I'm very grateful for all the opportunities and new things that I tried out before I started my family. While some of these experiences that I tried did take money, there's a lot of experiences out there that are free and don't require a lot of money to start. And doing so might make a big difference in your life from the 20s and beyond. So the key ideas are to use your 20s to find out who you are, take risks, and be out of your comfort zone during this time. So here are my lessons learned. Number 1, take risks, lots of it. If there's one thing I can tell anybody in their 20s to do is take lots of risks all the time. This is a period of time in which the world opens up to you and you can explore and try out new things with abandon. So when I'm talking about risk, I'm talking about trying new things, switching up careers, or working on personal growth and development. And this is also a time in which you can spend doing something and then have it go badly and then switch back to something else. You learn the lessons from that experience, but you aren't necessarily crippled in your life from it. You're still in that mindset of trying new things and figuring yourself out in the process. And as you'll see, the older you get, the harder it is to pivot to something new or to even try new things. In my early 20s, I really didn't do a lot of risky things. I waited until 23 before I moved out of my house. And from that time on, I really ramped up the amount of risks I was able to take. This had a direct correlation from being out of my parents' house. I moved to a bunch of new cities and created a huge network of people within those cities. And it was a period of massive growth that when I look upon it now, I have no regrets in doing it. I think that depending on your risk tolerance, you can either jump into a big risk right away or start with smaller risk and work your way up. Just be sure that you're always just a little bit out of your comfort zone and always pushing yourself to be better. And learning from that experience definitely has a positive impact on your future outlook. So in your 20s, take a lot of risk and learn from every new experience that you go through. Number 2, move to a new place. Depending on if you have the means, try to move as far away from your hometown as possible in your 20s. This really forces you to be on your own and learn your lessons independently from your parents' help. It can be intimidating at first, but gradually over time, you'll be very glad you've done it. By being by yourself, it forces you to think differently about certain situations and how to tackle new challenges. And it also creates new opportunities for you to meet different kinds of people in your life that you wouldn't normally talk to. Because growing up with your parents, you might not know other ways that people are able to do different things, or how the world really works if you're really sheltered like I was. I moved out of my parents' house at 23, and I subsequently moved to 2 different cities in my 20s. It was a lot of movement, and I could have done with moving to 1 less city. But in total, the experience helped me to craft the independent person that I am today, and also to really cope with being alone and being okay with that aloneness, to really help me to quiet the mind and enjoy alone time. It wasn't easy at all, but I found different ways to cope with that situation. Moving out by yourself might be hard depending on your finances, but if you have the means, you should definitely do so. It's a great way to discover who you really are and whether or not you can really take care of yourself out in the world. So moving out of your hometown is a big lesson that I learned in my 20s. Number 3, meet different people. Getting to interact and maybe make friends with different kinds of people was one of the most fun things I did in my 20s. Because I moved to new places all the time, I wasn't really picky on who I made friends with. I was desperate for interaction. So even if I didn't think we gelled 100%, I tried meeting new people just for the hell of it. What I learned from that experience was that everyone is really similar to each other. We all have similar wants, goals, and needs in life. And that I really shouldn't have judgment prior to me meeting and talking to those people. And by meeting different people, you see the world through their perspective. And that crucial experience helped me to understand people more deeply. I grew a lot from the various interactions I had with people throughout my 20s. I met people that took me skydiving, bar hopping, and whitewater rafting. Things that normally I would never have considered doing until they brought it up. Not only that, but after hundreds of hours of talking to these people, I learned a lot about life and some hacks along the way. Of course, I think you can meet new people at any age and at any time of day. Because we're all very busy people, and sometimes we just want to huddle in our own social circles and not branch out. Be on the lookout for people that are inquisitive about you or different from you to strike up that conversation. And you might be able to learn new things from those people that might give you an advantage in your life. Number 4, take advantage of your health. Similarly to taking risks, use your body in your 20s to your advantage. In our 20s, we feel that our bodies are indestructible. Use it. Meaning exercise, do rigorous things with it, and test its limits once in a while. This is debatable, but your health will never be as good as it was in its 20s. The exception, of course, is if you're really adamant on keeping your body in tip-top shape. But for most people, the 20s is your playground, and subsequent decades might not be as good. Obviously, take care of your body regardless of your age, but your 20s is a very special time in your life. When I was able to finally do things on my own after moving from my parents' house and no longer being restricted by time or money, I went wild. That meant I said yes to a lot of things that challenged my body and mind. And I really wanted to test the physical boundaries of my body at the time. And the things that I were able to try and keep within my life, I'm able to sustain and keep myself healthy. Things like hiking, hot yoga, and snowboarding have all integrated into my life. And those are the things that I can do in the more reckless period of my life, when my body can take it and bounce back quicker from fatigue or injury. So when you're in your 20s, take the time and take advantage of the fact that you are at your peak body. Try challenging and adventurous things, and hopefully you'll find a couple of habits that you may be able to retain over your lifetime. So we're building that habit of physical exercise within your life. And number 5, learn to live cheaply. Lastly, I learned that the cheap habits that I picked up in my 20s benefits me for the rest of my life. This is primarily to tackle lifestyle inflation that we all run into at some point in our lives. When you get higher paying job after school, you always want to get bigger and better things. And as you get that bigger paycheck in your mid-career, you might want a bigger house, a boat, or a car. Getting bigger and better things will never stop, and you'll always want more. By keeping costs low in your 20s and carrying it forward into your future, you might be able to save a lot of money in the end. And you'll also be less materialistic as a result of this. Because as you start to live with the possible discomfort of having crappier things, you learn to be okay and adapt to it. And the more experience you have with that adaptation, the less you want newer, bigger, and shinier things. This was how I was able to carry my cheapskate mindset into my 30s. I lived very minimalistically in my 20s up until a couple years into my 30s. I don't buy a lot of new things, and I always try to repair things as best as I can. And I always strongly considered things that I was buying if they were a fad or whether or not I really needed it. And through this process, I was able to save a lot of money and also travel extensively throughout my 20s and 30s. Or as I'm now finding out, all the money will go towards the child. So I think the way to approach this is to look at your cheap habits in your 20s and see whether or not you can carry them forward sustainably. That doesn't mean you have to eat ramen noodles every single night, but look towards reducing takeout or eating out at a fancy restaurant, or downsizing to a smaller house if you really don't need all that space you just got. The key idea is to keep your lifestyle inflation in check so that you can save the most amount of money for a rainy day. So living cheaply in my 20s and carrying that forward was another big lesson that I've learned. So here are my general thoughts of the lessons I learned in my 20s. My 20s were a transformative decade in my life, and I'm uncertain that another decade will have such an impact. As I'm now settled in my mid-30s and have a family, I don't know where the next burst of explosive growth will come from. The experiences of growth that I had in my 20s were very organic and unique, and I don't know if it can be replicated now that I have a family. As I move forward with my life, I think my 30s and 40s will be more natural and organic and a slower progression overall. And that might be radically different from what I experienced in my 20s. And that might be okay. And as I reflect on my 20s, I also realize that I've learned many deeper lessons learned from that period of time. And these deeper lessons are in direct contrast of what I learned in my teens and in my 30s. Each decade of my growth have given me different sets of experiences. So as I progress in time and move to my late 30s, I'm going to have a more deeper understanding of myself and what I went through. And these lessons will touch upon expectations, family, and trade-offs in life. So those were the main lessons that I've learned in my 20s. My 20s were undoubtedly the most challenging and fun times that I've ever had. Life experiences during this time were completely unparalleled to other times and periods in my life. Going from a very shy kid to someone who was very confident about their future. And those 10 years really changed my perspective on life and my future. I took big risks, bet on myself, and for the most part, I was rewarded from it. I believe that your 20s is a great time to expand and grow into your future selves, and really learn about the world at large and the various people that are in it. So the key lessons that I've learned are to take lots of risks, meet various different people, and use your health to your advantage. So I hope with some of my lessons learned, you'll be able to carry that forward into your 20s. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment down below on what are you most looking forward to in your 20s, and if you've gone through the experience already, what did you learn from it? And I'll see you next time.